He stared at me through his pricey rimless glasses and smirked. With your salary, I could hire 3 junior engineers. We need to streamline, nothing personal. I gripped the handle of my laptop bag, keeping my hand from trembling. Across from me sat Ethan Blake, the newly hired chief technology officer brought in from a fintech firm in Boston. 6 months ago, he'd walked into this office with a polished resume, smooth-talking charm, and dreams of modernizing the entire tech stack. Turns out, that dream meant getting rid of people like me. The conference room was so silent I could hear his fountain pen tapping rhythmically against the oak table. Beside him was Karen from HR, trying to look neutral as she slid a folder toward me. 8 weeks of salary and your remaining vacation days, she said quietly, along with a positive reference letter. I pushed the folder back without opening it. So that's what 18 years comes down to? No one replied. Ethan nodded, that same insincere nod MBA types use to close deals. He probably thought I'd yell, cry, threaten legal action. I just stood up, slowly. Thanks. I'll clear out today. Karen looked surprised. Ethan clearly looked disappointed. He wanted a scene. Something dramatic to relay to the board. He overreacted, not a cultural fit. I didn't give him that satisfaction, not because I wasn't angry, but because I had nothing left to feel. Anger is for things that still matter, and in that moment, I just felt empty. My name is David Monroe. I'm 54. I used to be the head of systems engineering at Northbridge Communities, a property management group that stretched from Chicago to St. Louis. I joined back when it was still a family-run firm with 4 apartment buildings and a dial-up modem. I built everything from scratch, from the tenant application systems to the interstate data network. I used to believe the company needed me as much as I needed them, but to the new leadership, I was just another cost. A red number on the balance sheet. As I walked out of the conference room, a few glances followed me. Nervous. Fleeting. Former colleagues avoided eye contact like I was a bad omen. I understood. No one wanted to be next. I packed my things into a cardboard box, 18 years reduced to a few notebooks, a model server, and a photo of my wife that sat beside my monitor. No goodbyes. No thank yous. On the way to the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Josh, the database engineer I'd hired 10 years ago. David, what happened? Everyone's freaking out. I didn't reply. I needed air. I needed to get out before the anger became something I couldn't control. That afternoon, I sat alone on the deck of my home just outside Springfield, watching the lake lie still. My wife Lisa stepped out and handed me a cup of hot tea. You okay? I nodded. I think so. She sat beside me. What will you do now? I stared into the fading horizon. I don't know. But I do know this. They have no idea what they just threw away. And they'd find out soon enough. I thought the next morning would be quiet. But before I could even finish pouring my coffee, the phone rang. Unknown number. I watched the screen until it rolled to voicemail. Then another call, from Karen. David, sorry to bother you this early. Her voice was tight in the message, but the new tech team needs help. They can't figure out the current architecture. Ethan was hoping you'd consider a few consulting sessions. The rate's very competitive. I quietly deleted the message. 7 hours later, just as the sun slipped behind the maples, an email from Ethan popped up. Subject line: short-term collaboration, minus high priority. I skimmed it. David, I realize yesterday may have been unexpected, but we truly value the work you did at Northbridge. The new team needs guidance. A few weeks of consulting could make a huge difference. $250 an hour, flexible schedule. I didn't respond, not because the money was too little, but because the nerve was too much. I never wrote a single line of that system for money. I did it because I believed in building something meaningful. I'd proposed hiring a documentation team 4 years ago, specifically to prevent this. Ethan shut it down cold. Not essential, he said at the time. The system's stable. Stable enough that I was the only one who understood how the data flowed through it. 2 days later, I received a message from someone unexpected. Jonas West, VP of Operations. One of the few who used to back me under the old regime. David, what happened wasn't right. I no longer have the authority to reverse Ethan's decision, but I hope you'll consider helping during this transition. The team is overwhelmed and things are starting to break. I know you don't want to see everything you built fall apart. I stared at that last sentence. A part of me did hesitate. I had spent nearly 20 years holding that foundation together. But I also remembered every ignored warning, every dismissed proposal, every meeting where I had to defend my own worth to people who didn't care to understand. And I remembered Ethan's eyes when he said, "It's a financial decision, don't take it personally." That night, I booted up my computer, not to reply, but to revisit my personal archive. The notes I'd kept, the sketches, the version histories, a habit forged through years of surviving one management shift after another. I didn't take anything from the company, but I had what they didn't, a living memory of every critical decision made across those 18 years. I knew how the payment software was manually tied to the access control system. I remembered the exact line of code used to catch anomalous behavior in the security module, code no one had touched since 2012. The next morning, another call came in. Not from Ethan, from his wife, Samantha. "Hi, is this David? I know this is unusual, but Ethan hasn't slept in 2 nights. The payment system's crashing, over 300 residents can't access their accounts, people are starting to post online, reporters are calling." I said nothing, unsure whether to laugh or sigh. "You don't have to help," she added. I just thought, if someone did this to Ethan, it would break him. That sentence passed through me like a cold wind. Not because I felt sympathy, but because it showed me Ethan still didn't see anything wrong in how he'd treated me. In his mind, I was just a disposable component, not a human being with value. "You should let Ethan call me himself," I said softly. That afternoon, I headed to the lake with a fishing rod I hadn't touched in over a year. As the sunlight danced on the water, I thought to myself, if they need me this badly now, what made them think cutting me out was ever a good idea? I didn't need to rush to answer them. I didn't owe them anything, and if they wanted my help, they'd have to pay the true price of what I'm worth. From now on, everything would happen on my terms. I never meant to turn that system into a maze, but when someone hands you a pile of disconnected blueprints, no measurements, no budget, and tells you to build a city that runs flawlessly year-round, you don't have many choices. Since 2005, when Northbridge Communities was still a small family business with fewer than 10 buildings and 2 IT staff, I was the only one designing, deploying, and maintaining the tech infrastructure. I was 20 years younger then, but already obsessed with stability and security. I didn't use off-the-shelf software. I hand-coded every part of the rental application system. I built my own background check tool by integrating 3 federal data sources. When we expanded into 3 more states, I wrote a maintenance dispatch algorithm, something even large tech firms are still struggling to implement today. I built all of that quietly, no titles, no awards. I proposed creating a dedicated documentation team 3 separate times. All I asked for was 2 people, one to write, one to verify. Each time I got the same answer, no budget. They told me to wait until next quarter, then next fiscal year. Everyone knows next quarter means never. So I kept it all in my head. 2-tier encryption for payment data, fragmented storage architecture for faster tenant record retrieval, conflict handling routines when 2 tasks ran simultaneously. I was the only one who knew how the layers fit together. I warned them. 3 years ago, in a meeting between the engineering and executive teams, I presented a detailed report titled Single Source System Dependency Risk. The headline blazed red on the projector screen. They looked at me like I was speaking Greek. Ethan wasn't even at the company yet. The CEO back then was Raymond Sterling, a guy good at selling dreams to investors but couldn't tell the difference between an API and a VPN. Raymond said, "David, I trust you, but the system's running fine. Let's not scare people." I had done my part. And now? They're scrambling, Because a single error handling script has locked up the payment system. I know exactly what caused it. It was an emergency failsafe I wrote during Thanksgiving 2017, after a third-party update triggered unexpected conflicts. If not triggered in the proper sequence, it auto-severs the secure connection to protect customer data. I sent an email asking that code be documented. No one responded. Yesterday afternoon, while I was reading in the garden, I got a call from one of the company's internal numbers. I still had it saved under West Data Center. When I picked up, the voice on the other end was cracking under pressure. "David, this is Dylan, the new back-end team lead. I know you don't work here anymore, but the system's down. We haven't been able to access the payment database for 3 days. The outside consultants gave up. Ethan. Ethan says if anyone can fix this, it's you." I said nothing. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was picturing another version of me, hunched over a monitor at 2 a.m., patching bugs, running backups, just to make sure no tenant ever missed a billing notice. "Can you help us? I know you're not obligated, but..." Dylan hesitated. "If this keeps up, we're facing a class action lawsuit." I sighed. "Dylan, I get it. But don't you see the irony? A company making millions in profit wouldn't pay for proper documentation." He didn't answer. I thought about Ethan's email from the previous week. Nothing personal, just cost restructuring. "This isn't just a technical issue," I continued. "It's a choice. The choice they made when they decided who was a burden and who brought value." Before hanging up, I said one thing. "Tell Ethan the system isn't broken. It's reflecting exactly how they treated the person who built it." That night, I wrote a line in my digital journal. The system didn't fail. It simply stopped serving those who no longer deserved to use it. I shut off the lights, closed the laptop, and went to bed with a mind clearer than it had been in years. But the game was only just beginning. 3 days after Dylan's call, I woke up to a string of frantic phone rings. It was 6:12 a.m. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Ethan Blake. I didn't answer. An hour later, while I was washing the old car in my driveway, Ethan sent an email. "David, the situation is critical. The tenant portal has been down since Friday night. The payment system is locked up. We can't access subscriber data. Customers are threatening a class action suit. I know there's been tension between us, but I'm asking for a second chance. We're prepared to offer $500 an hour for your support, with a schedule that works for you. Please consider it." I read the message, closed my laptop, and stared at the neighbor's SUV slowly backing out of the garage. No anger, no satisfaction, just a cold, steady stillness. The same company that once said I was too expensive was now hemorrhaging cash because no one could understand the system I left behind. That afternoon, I got a message from Carly, the customer support lead I once helped optimize the ticket response system. "David, I'm sorry to bother you. There are more than 800 unresolved service requests. Some tenants can't pay rent, and the system is flagging them as delinquent. A single mother got locked out of her unit at 2 a.m. due to a verification error. The whole office is in crisis." I replied, "Carly, I'm truly sorry, but I can't fix the damage they chose to cause." That evening, Karen called. I answered. Her voice was hoarse. "David, it's a mess. The entire tech division is stuck. The new engineers don't understand the data flow prioritization, so when parallel processing kicks in, the payment gateway crashes from conflicting inputs." I gave a dry chuckle. "I wrote documentation warning about that back in 2019. "I know," she sighed, "but that document was stored on the old server, and now no one can access it anymore." She hesitated. "Ethan is being pushed to submit an emergency report to the board. They're threatening to suspend him if the system isn't restored within the next 48 hours. When I warned them, everyone said I was overreacting," I said. "Now everyone wishes you were," Karen said softly. That night, as Lisa and I sat down for dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Ethan was standing there. Wrinkled shirt, messy hair, eyes full of panic. The arrogance from the day I was fired was completely gone. David, I know I have no right to be here, but I need your help. I crossed my arms. Help with what? Just a few days. The system's collapsing. I didn't think it would be this complex. No, you didn't want to think that. Because if you had listened instead of making decisions off a spreadsheet, I'd still be at my desk, not standing on my porch. Ethan took a step back. I can pay whatever rate you ask. I shook my head. It was never about money. Then what? Revenge? I looked at him for a long moment, then replied, No. It's about fairness. About people like me, like Carly, like the residents who lost their data, not being reduced to line items in a cost-cutting plan. Ethan took a deep breath. We're losing the Ridgewood Estates contract. That's 40% of our monthly revenue. The board's talking about selling the company ahead of schedule. I wasn't surprised. I'd heard rumors from a few former partners. When the foundation crumbles, the valuation goes with it. Do you want to come back, David? Ethan asked. We'll pay in full, including stock options. I looked him straight in the eyes. No, I'm not coming back to fix the mess made by people who once called me a liability. I closed the door. He didn't knock again. The next morning, an email from a competing firm, Halcyon Tech, was already waiting in my inbox. We heard you've left Northbridge. Would you be open to discussing a special project? A brand new system, full control, and a team of engineers hand-picked by you. I smiled. In the end, when real value is recognized, the invitations come on their own. 3 days after that email, I sat across from Lucas Grant, Halcyon Tech's Chief Technology Officer, at a small cafe north of Des Plaines, about a 40-minute drive from downtown Chicago. No flashy signs, no loud music, just the smell of freshly roasted coffee and the quiet conversations of people meeting with purpose. Lucas, in his early 40s, wore simple clothes and spoke with calm precision, but his eyes were razor-sharp. David, I know you've received more than a few offers, Lucas began, but we're not here to buy temporary help. We're here because of the philosophy you bring. I said nothing, just sipped my espresso. He continued, We're expanding our property management system into the Midwest. We need something solid, secure, flexible, and not dependent on boxed solutions. You understand that better than anyone. I'm not repeating old mistakes, I said plainly. I'm not building a system that becomes a single point of failure because there's no documentation or it all depends on one person. Lucas nodded, as if waiting for that line. He placed a folder on the table. We're offering you full authority, architecture, tech stack, team structure, and long-term training strategy. A salary 25% higher than your last role at Northbridge, plus equity and technical decision priority. I opened the first page. The commitments were clearly outlined. No vague clauses, no hidden traps. At the bottom was a special clause. All systems must include formal documentation phases, cross-testing, internal engineer training, and a minimum 72-hour independent failover plan. I closed the folder. This isn't just an offer, I said. This is a course correction for an industry that once dismissed responsible engineers. Lucas gave a quiet smile. You're right. And do you want to lead that change? I shook his hand without a second thought. The new office was on the 18th floor of a modern glass building in Schaumburg. Compact, open layout, full of natural light. No massage chairs, no free espresso bars, but everyone knew what they were building and why it mattered. I started by laying the foundation, a layered system architecture, safely distributed data, auto-detection fault mechanisms, and real-time simulation tools for engineer training. I requested a team of 8. 4 software engineers, 2 QA testers, 1 documentation specialist, and 1 technical coordinator. Halcyon Tech approved it instantly. I laid down the first rule. No code gets pushed to production without accompanying documentation. Someone clicked their tongue. I looked directly at them. We're not just writing software. We're building a system that survives even if its creator walks away. Everyone nodded and followed through. 3 weeks later, I received our first performance report. System error rate 0.07%, 3 times better than the industry average. The support team was able to manage operations without me for a full 2-day simulated outage. One afternoon, while I was reviewing access permission diagrams, Lucas walked in with unexpected news. "David, I just got a call from Terrace Realty Group, one of the major clients that used to belong to Northbridge. They are thinking about switching to our system." I looked up. What did they say? They said the old system isn't reliable anymore and they want to work with someone who builds to last, not just a function. I didn't respond. What I felt wasn't pride, but something greater. A quiet affirmation that doing things right still holds value, no matter how often it's overlooked. And as I watched my team run the weekend simulation, each person clearly understanding their role, I wasn't just building a system. I was setting a new standard. The old game might be over, but the new one? I'd made the first move. That Friday afternoon, I was in a meeting with the QA team discussing real-time maintenance alert deployment when my phone vibrated. The caller ID made me pause for a second. Elliot Crane. Elliot had been a senior database specialist at Northbridge, the only person besides me I trusted with top-level access. After I was let go, he tried to stick around, but the endless nonsense meetings and backwards decisions from the new board eventually pushed him out. I stepped into the hallway and answered. Elliot's voice sounded like he'd just come out of a server room. "David, I don't even know where to begin. Northbridge's backup system, or Northrise now, because they just rebranded for a new PR campaign, it's completely broken." I stopped walking. "What kind of broken?" The 3 main backups from the last 3 years were overwritten with the wrong format during a server migration 2 months ago. No one checked the checksums, no one did a recovery simulation. Now that they need access to last year's payment records, it's all garbage data. I said nothing. Elliot continued. "The consultants they hired, some firm called Vertitech, sounds impressive, said it'll take at least 6 months to recover part of it. If they're lucky." I sighed. I wrote step-by-step backup procedures, with specific command lines, and clear warnings that the payment module's storage format can't tolerate. "David, I know," Elliot interrupted. "I read that doc many times, but after you left, the new guys called it overly complicated and handed backup duties to the DevOps team, who'd never touched your system before." Silence stretched a few seconds, then Elliot lowered his voice. "There's something else. I need to show you." That evening, we met at a small Mexican diner tucked behind an abandoned strip mall in Evanston. Elliot brought his personal laptop. He opened it and showed me a chain of emails pulled from an executive account he still had temporary access to. The sender was Graham Reeve, the former CTO who once looked me in the eye and said I was too expensive to keep. In the emails, Graham was reporting to a private equity group preparing to acquire Northbridge. "We're streamlining the tech division, plan to lay off at least 3 senior personnel including David Monroe, who manages the core system but has an operating cost twice the industry average." Right below that, a handwritten note. "Moving David cuts $260,000 per year and increases transition feasibility to off-the-shelf solutions within 6 months. Ideal for the merger timeline." I leaned back in my seat, fists clenched. "You know what, David?" Elliot said quietly. "Graham didn't just want you gone. He wanted to erase you from the technical record, from the company's history. Some of your original code had the developer tags changed to the new team. I only caught it because I still have the original commits from 2 years ago." It felt like someone stabbed me clean through the spine. "They want to sell the company," Elliot continued. "But now the deal might collapse. Their biggest client, Summit Residential Group, has frozen all contracts because of payment issues and 3 weeks of tenant portal outages." I stared at him, unblinking. "Summit accounts for nearly 35% of their total revenue." "Exactly. And their CEO, Jordan Blake, called me. He remembered seeing your name in old tech documents." I sat upright. "You're serious?" Elliot nodded. "They're considering shifting their entire infrastructure to a new partner if they can find someone who guarantees a seamless transition. I may have mentioned Halcyon Tech." I said nothing, but in my mind the pieces were snapping into place. A sinking company, a desperate client, and me, the one who laid the original foundation, now in a position to turn it all around. David. Elliot looked at me. I'm not saying this to pressure you. I just think, if there were ever a time to close the chapter on how they treated you, this is it. I gripped my iced tea, not out of anger, but because I realized I never needed revenge. What they did was coming back to destroy them without my help. I didn't need to bring their system down. I just needed to build something better and wait. The call came on Monday morning, just after I wrapped a sprint review with the Halcyon dev team. The voice didn't introduce himself, just a man trying hard to stay composed. Mr. Monroe, this is Mark Trenton, legal counsel for Northbridge. We're looking into potential violations of your post-employment agreement. I stood up and closed the glass door behind me. Specifically, there are signs that you may have transferred proprietary knowledge, including system architecture or source code, to Halcyon Tech, which is now courting former Northbridge clients. If that's the case, we may have to proceed with legal action. I closed my eyes for a second, keeping my voice steady. Mr. Trenton, I left Northbridge empty-handed, per your client's request. Every line of code was and remains property of the company as outlined in my employment contract. I've never taken any source code or internal documents with me. However, I continued firmly, my professional knowledge and experience built over nearly 2 decades belong to me. There's no clause that prevents me from using those to build a new system, especially one developed entirely from scratch. Silence. Then he exhaled, audibly. We'll escalate this to legal review and continue monitoring. Go ahead, I replied. And for the record, I retained my own attorney the moment I was removed from that project. Let them talk. I hung up, but I already knew who was really behind that call. Not legal, Graham Reeve, the man who used threats as his go-to when control began slipping away. 2 days later, Graham called me himself. David, I don't want this to get ugly. You already crossed that line, Graham, I said. The day you replaced my name in the source files. He gave a nervous laugh. All right, let's talk like professionals. We're restructuring the entire tech division. The board approved a new budget. If you agree to come back, I can propose a salary 50% higher than before, a signing bonus, and the position of Chief Systems Advisor. Stock options? I asked. Negotiable, he replied quickly. And more than that, you'll have full authority to rebuild the architecture, however you see fit. I gave a dry laugh. You still don't get it, Graham. This was never about money or power. It's about trust. Betraying me once was your mistake. Coming back now would be mine. David, you need to understand. Graham lowered his voice, colder now. Whatever you're building at Halcyon, if it's based on technology that used to belong to us, then legally, I cut him off. Don't waste your breath throwing cheap threats at someone who understands the legal framework better than you think. The system I'm building at Halcyon is completely new, written from scratch, with time-stamped version control. You don't have a case. Graham went quiet for a long time. Finally, he muttered, bitterly. So, you're choosing their side. I didn't hesitate. I'm choosing the right side. That afternoon, I told everything to Lucas Grant, Halcyon's CTO. He simply nodded. We've got your back. Just keep doing what you've been doing. And we did. Over the next 3 weeks, Halcyon's system was deployed as a pilot across a small property cluster in Milwaukee. It ran smoothly, with response times 43% faster than any old software Summit used at Northbridge. Summit Residential signed a formal memorandum of understanding the following week, with plans to expand if performance held steady over the next 60 days. That evening, I got a text from Elliot. Northbridge just paused the sale. The investors pulled out, lost confidence in their ability to recover the data. I stared at the words, and I knew revenge had never been part of my plan. I just stayed still, did the work, and let the truth speak for itself. As for Graham, he chose to eliminate the one person who could have saved the system, And now, the company he once tried to control was sliding, faster than he could stop it. I didn't feel triumphant, just strangely at peace. Nearly 6 months after I refused to return to Northbridge, a closed-door meeting was held on the 21st floor of Halcyon Tech HQ. Only 4 people were present: me, Lucas Grant, the company's CFO, and a special guest, Julian Reese, the investment fund rep who'd backed out of the original Northbridge acquisition due to doubts about its leadership. "It's worse than I imagined," Julian began, his calm tone laced with disdain. "They just lost their last major client in the Northeast. Negative cash flow for 3 straight months. The board's jumping ship. If Halcyon wants rapid expansion, this is the moment." Lucas glanced at me. "What do you think, David?" I didn't rush to answer. I thought about the lines of code written at 3 a.m. About Elliot, Carly, the people who believed in the system I'd built. About Graham. And the desperate silence in his final call. "I think," I said slowly, "if we take this on, we have to do it right from the very first step." Lucas nodded. "You'll have full authority." 2 weeks later, Halcyon Tech announced the acquisition of Northbridge for only 22% of its valuation from the previous year. The deal included all technical assets, software and infrastructure, plus full discretion to restructure staffing to Halcyon standards. I was named Chief Integration Officer, tasked with merging both systems. A role that was part engineering, part moral reckoning. I returned to the old River Forest office, once the heart of Northbridge. A new logo greeted me at the front desk: Halcyon Integrated Property Systems. Some old faces looked away when I walked in. A few offered awkward smiles. But there were also hopeful eyes, those who had stood beside me to keep it all from falling apart for over a decade. We held an all-hands engineering meeting in the largest conference room. I stood in front of the digital board. No slides, no PowerPoint, just this. "I know some of you saw me as part of the past, but I'm not here to reopen old wounds. I'm here to build a future we can be proud of. At Halcyon, we don't judge people by their history. We measure them by their quality and commitment. If you're willing to relearn, to rebuild the right way, there's a place for you." I saw Elliot nod from the back row. Carly stood beside him, eyes slightly red. We split the integration into 3 teams, one for data migration, one to rebuild the payment module under a new architecture, and one for documentation with budget and proper staffing. The first 90 days went like surgical precision. The new system was deployed gradually. Only when a region was fully stable did we proceed with data transfer. No flip-the-switch moments, no flashy PR campaigns. Graham, according to Julian, was removed from the board before the deal closed. He disappeared without a word. No statements, no defense. Maybe even he knew his biggest mistake was underestimating the one person who understood how to keep it all running. By the end of our first post-merger quarter, performance reports indicated transaction processing time reduced by 47%, operational errors under 0.2%, and most crucially, no client terminated their contract. Halcyon hadn't just saved a crumbling system. We proved that when people who understand real value are given control, they can turn wreckage into something stronger than ever. That day ended with a small meeting of the technical documentation team. I watched a young MIT grad carefully revising a system diagram comment. She looked up, flustered. "I'm not totally sure what this block of code is doing, David." I nodded. "Good, because if you're asking, no one else will need to ask later." The old system ran well because one person understood everything. The new one would thrive because everyone knew their part. And I truly believed we were building something that would stand long after I was gone. Autumn wind rushed through the 3rd floor of Halcyon's headquarters, carrying the scent of fresh wood and the footsteps of a new generation. It was here I had proposed converting an old storage wing into our internal tech training center. 3 months after the merger closed, it opened with a simple but meaningful name: The Foundry. After the ribbon cutting, Lucas smiled and said, "I haven't seen you smile this much in a year." I nodded. "That's because I'm not fixing code. I'm fixing people. The Foundry wasn't a typical training center. It didn't teach tools, it taught how to think like someone building a system others could rely on. From naming conventions that made sense to architectures built to survive the unexpected, everything centered on one philosophy. Do it right the first time, so no one pays the price later. The first cohort had 15 students. They came from different departments: software engineers, product managers, QA analysts. Some were fresh out of school, others had once worked at Northbridge and chose to stay after the merger. One student, named Emma, a Stanford grad, who previously worked at a fintech startup, asked me during orientation, "David, why didn't you write a book or start your own company? With your reputation, you could have done something much bigger." I smiled, picked up a piece of chalk and wrote 3 words on the board: knowledge, responsibility, legacy. I don't need my name on a book cover. I need yours mentioned when a system still runs after 5 years without falling apart. The class went silent, not because they didn't understand, but because they were absorbing a philosophy this industry had forgotten for far too long. I asked each student to complete a final project, build a simple, simulated system with architectural documentation, data flow diagrams, failure recovery plans, and a user guide written for someone who had never seen the system before. Emma was the first to submit. When I opened her PDF, what impressed me wasn't the complexity, it was the sentence on the first page. I wrote this documentation as if the next person won't know who I am, but will still be grateful I thought of them. I closed the laptop and sat in silence for a long while, because I had begun to leave behind something far greater than lines of code. That year, Halcyon held its annual leadership summit. Lucas opened the meeting. "We've restored a system that once stood on the edge of collapse. But more importantly, we didn't choose the fastest way. We chose the right way." Then he turned to me. "David, I have a proposal." I was a little surprised. Lucas never made offers without careful thought. "We want the Foundry to become an official division, with its own budget and quarterly curriculum. Not just internal training, but open to partners and final year engineering students. Everyone agrees you should lead it, full authority. The new title? Director of Sustainable Systems Development." I sat quietly for a moment, then said, "If I accept, I have one condition." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "Anything, go ahead." "All courses must be free for former Northbridge engineers who lost their jobs when the system collapsed." The room fell silent. No one objected. Lucas smiled. "Looks like I judged the right man." One Wednesday morning, while I was revising materials for the next session, I received an unexpected email. No name, just the address. graham.reeve@outlook.com. Subject line, "I was wrong." The message was short. "David, I heard about your training program. I'm not apologizing to gain anything. I just need to say, I get it now. Late, but I get it. I hope you keep building the things I once dismissed." I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, but because everything I needed to say was now in how I lived, how I worked, and how I helped others build things that lasted longer than power, status, or some flashy email subject line. I closed the laptop, stepped out into the sunlit hallway, and watched a new group of students laughing as they headed toward class. In that moment, I knew something for sure. The only thing strong enough to answer being underestimated is a legacy done right. David never sought revenge, nor let the past hold him back. Instead, he rebuilt from the ground up, with knowledge, calm, and a level of professional integrity rarely seen. From someone once discarded as too expensive, he became the leader of a new generation of engineers who deeply understand the value of sustainable systems. At Halcyon, David didn't just restore what was broken. He left behind a living legacy, where knowledge is shared, responsibility is cultivated, and value is proven through action, not titles. What do you think about David's journey and the choices he made? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, family, and true worth.